The road was pale with frost. A ribbon of dust turned white, and the wind moved along it the way regret does, quiet, persistent, unwilling to be chased away. I remember that evening because the sky carried a bruised color, purple pressed into gray, and the sun went down as if it were ashamed to be seen leaving her there. She sat just off the road, knees drawn to her chest, crying into hands that had already gone numb. Winter had found her before mercy did. Elara Mayfield had been abandoned without ceremony. No argument, no last cruel sentence to cling to, just the sound of a wagon creaking forward, the jingle of harness fading, and the hollow realization that silence could be louder than shouting. She stayed seated long after the tracks disappeared, as if remaining still might call them back, as if the earth itself would notice her obedience and reward it with return. When that didn't happen, she pressed her forehead to the ground and let the cold bite her cheeks. It felt deserved. Shame has a way of convincing you that suffering is proof of honesty. Her coat was thin, a thing made for autumn, and the wind slipped through it like a practiced thief. Each breath burned. She counted them at first, then lost track. Somewhere in her chest, fear tapped politely, waiting to be acknowledged. She didn't scream. She didn't wave. Pride, what little remained, kept her rooted. She told herself she would walk once the crying stopped. She told herself many things that evening. The sound of hooves came soft, measured, respectful of the quiet. Elara thought at first it was another memory, the mind's cruel habit of replaying hope. But the ground answered back with weight. A horse emerged from the dim, breath fogging the air, high dark against the snow. The man riding it sat straight, not stiff, as though stillness was a choice he made every day. He slowed before reaching her, not wanting to startle, and for a long moment he only watched, eyes taking in the smallness of her, the way she seemed folded inward, trying to disappear. Calderholt did not ask what had happened. He did not ask her name. He swung down from the saddle, boots crunching, and removed his coat. It was worn, heavy with years, and when he draped it around her shoulders, the fabric carried the scent of leather, smoke, and something steady she couldn't name. He held it there until her hands came up to grip it, until the shivering lessened enough for breath to return without sobbing. "There," he said, as if addressing the cold itself. That was all. She looked up then. His face was lined not with cruelty, but with time, eyes the color of winter creeks that know how to keep moving beneath ice. He offered a canteen. She drank without asking permission, the water sharp and alive. When she handed it back, their fingers brushed, and she flinched out of habit more than fear. He noticed. He always noticed small things. The ride into town passed without questions. She sat behind him, not touching his back, hands wrapped around the saddle horn, body leaning away from warmth she didn't feel entitled to. Snow began to fall, thin flakes that caught in her lashes. Calder kept the horse at a careful pace, one hand steady on the reins, the other ready should she slip. He did not look back, but he listened to her breathing, to the way it hitched whenever a light appeared ahead. The town rose out of the winter like a collection of judgments given shape. Lamps glowed behind frosted windows. Smoke climbed chimneys in straight, disciplined lines. As they passed the saloon, laughter spilled out and died upon seeing them. Heads turned, eyes lingered. Stories formed faster than facts ever do. Elara felt herself shrinking again, her borrowed coat suddenly too heavy with expectation. Calder dismounted first and offered his hand. She hesitated, then took it. His grip was firm without insistence, and when she stood, he positioned himself half a step ahead of her, as if the air itself needed guidance. Sheriff Amos Kincaid watched from the boardwalk, hat low, gaze unreadable. Martha Bell paused mid-conversation, smile fixed in place a moment too long. Jonah Pike wiped a glass and pretended not to see, which was its own kind of seeing. No one spoke to Elara. That, too, was a language. Calder answered a question that hadn't been asked by nodding once toward the far end of town. "She'll be with me," he said, voice even. It was not a declaration, only a statement of direction. His place sat beyond the last fence, where the town gave up and land took over. The barn was solid, warm with animal breath. He set a lantern down and showed her where she could sleep. Hay stacked high, a blanket folded neat. He left food without comment. Before closing the door, he paused, then placed a small bar of soap on a crate, the kind with lavender pressed faint into it, a detail that suggested he had thought of her as a person, not a problem. Night settled deep. Ilara lay awake listening to the horses shift and sigh. The barn creaked, old with remembering other winters. She cried again, quietly this time, into wool that smelled like survival. The road had forgotten her name, but somewhere beyond the fence, a man had not. The thought warmed her just enough to sleep, and the cold waited patiently for morning. Morning arrived without ceremony, pale light slipping through the barn slats like a cautious visitor. Ilara woke before the horses, stiff and unsure, listening to her own breath as if it might betray her presence. The cold had settled into her bones during the night, but it no longer felt like punishment. It felt like a test she might survive. She rose quietly, folded the blanket as she had been taught long ago, and waited. When Calder came with grain and water, he nodded once, approval given without performance. That small acknowledgment steadied her more than kindness ever had. Days arranged themselves into labor. She learned the weight of buckets, the language of animals, the way winter demanded patience, and rewarded it with clarity. Her hands cracked, then healed stronger. Calder never corrected her with words. He showed her once and trusted her to remember. At night, he left a bowl of stew on the crate by her bed, steam rising, salt and meat reminding her she still had a body worth feeding. They spoke little, yet the quiet grew companionable, shaped by shared effort rather than obligation. Town whispers found their way out to the ranch the way smoke finds cracks. Ilara heard them when she rode in for supplies, felt them in the way prices rose and greetings thinned. She saw Calder absorb the costs, longer hours, colder shoulders, with the same calm he brought to everything else. Guilt settled on her like fresh snow. She began waking earlier, working later, as if effort could erase association. Still, she watched him from the corner of her eye, memorizing the care with which he repaired a fence, the patience he showed a nervous colt. She did not mistake this attention for romance. It was reverence, and it frightened her. One dawn, she packed before the light could catch her. She placed the borrowed coat where he would find it, brushed hay from the floor, and left a note she did not sign. The words were simple and unconvincing. She had learned enough to know when she was in the way. At the fence line, the sky opened into white, wind lifting her hair as if urging her on. Calder's voice reached her without urgency. He did not call her name. He said, "You don't owe this town your disappearance." When she turned, he stood with a key in his palm, small and ordinary. He closed her fingers around it, his touch brief, precise. "House is warmer," he added, as though offering a tool. She stared at the key until the world narrowed to its edges. The choice was not rescue or ruin. It was dignity. She nodded once, because anything more would have broken her. The storm came a week later, sudden and total. Snow erased distance and sound, trapping them together in the house that smelled faintly of soap and old books. Calder cut his hand, mending a shutter. Ilara cleaned the wound, her hand steady, her voice calm, as she told him when to breathe. They sat across from each other afterward, fire ticking, cups warming their palms. He did not reach for her. She did not ask him to. The intimacy lay in trust, in the unspoken agreement to remain. When the storm cleared, the town called a meeting. Ilara walked beside Calder into the hall, boots sure on the floorboards. Eyes followed. Martha Bell's mouth tightened. Sheriff Kincaid cleared his throat and offered Ilara work at the schoolhouse. Said it plainly, publicly. The room shifted. Ilara lifted her chin and met the gaze she once fled. She accepted without gratitude that begged. Calder stood with her, not in front. The balance mattered. Winter loosened its grip slowly. On the road beyond town, the snow thinned, revealing the dirt beneath, marked by many journeys. I remember thinking then that rescue is rarely loud. It looks like a code offered without questions, a key placed in a hand, a place made warm enough to choose. If this story found you when you needed it, stay with us. There are more roads, more winters, and more quiet mercies ahead. Subscribe to Wild West Tales and walk them with us.